Story time on how my sister married our stepdad after our mom passed away. Okay, so boom. My sister and I are like best friends since we're only 1 year apart. We have the same mom and dad, but my mom divorced our dad after catching him cheating on her. About 5 years later, my mom met our stepdad and got married, and we've been a happy family ever since. So me and my sister started off very close, but our relationship became strained when I noticed my sister and stepdad being way too close. I never caught them doing anything, but their relationship was inappropriate. But it always happened behind me and my mom's back. I only seen them sneak off a couple times when they didn't expect me to come out my room while my mom was at work. But it was only very long hugs and kisses on the cheeks that I seen. Unfortunately, my mom got sick and ended up passing away due to an incurable problem. Me and my mom were super close, and all my mom asked our stepdad to do is take care of us alongside our real dad. Little did we know, like Part 2 on how my sister married our stepdad after our mom passed away. Okay, so boom, like I said, my mom got sick with an incurable problem and just asked our stepdad to take care of us alongside our real dad. Then my mom passed away in peace. But little did she or I know the chaos that would come laid her head. And of course I knew what was going on in there. Who wouldn't? One day I was so enraged by my sister's actions, especially after our mom passed away, that I barged into their room where I seen balloons, hearts, and roses everywhere. I then saw my sister crying as she happily held her hand up and said, "We're getting married." I got into a screaming match with my sister and how she could do this to our mom, to where she responded, "Mom's not here. It's only been 5 months." Part 3 on how my sister married our stepdad after our mom passed away. Okay, so boom, like I said, my sister happily held her hand up and said, "We're getting married." We argued and I told her how could she do this to mom. And she responded, "Mom's not here anymore." It's only been 5 months, guys. I was so angry. I couldn't hold myself back. My sister was older, but I was bigger and taller, and I beat my sister up until our stepdad broke it up. My sister had a huge black eye, and before I left, I spit on my stepdad. I know it's nasty, guys, but you don't understand the level of anger and disrespect I felt for my mom. I called my real dad, and once I explained everything to him, he went inside and grabbed my sister away from our stepdad. The dads went to war, but my real dad ended up winning. And then he called the cops. My stepdad groomed my sister and engaged in unlawful acts with her. He's currently in jail where my sister visits him all the time. My sister is convinced she was not groomed and that they were in love. She even says she'll wait for him. She'll be waiting a long time. I'm just glad that I was able to get justice from Story time on how I read my little sister's diary and found her fantasizing about me. Okay, so boom, jumping right in. My little sister and I have a great relationship. I'm her big sister and I protect her from all her bullies and always have her back in any situation. My little sister is 13 and I'm 18, but one thing about my sister is she gonna write in her diary. Literally, she's obsessed with jotting down every single thing that happens in her life. Well, recently, my sister has been acting a bit different. She's just been so distant, and I feel like she's been pushing me away. Me being a worried big sister, I asked her if she's having trouble at school, but she told me she's fine and closed the door on me. So, since she wasn't telling me anything, I waited until she went to volleyball practice and snuck into her room. I took her diary, and I know I shouldn't do it, but I couldn't help it because I really felt like my sister was having trouble at school. But what I found in that diary changed our sister relationship. Changed for the worse. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I read my little sister's diary and found her fantasizing about me. Okay, so boom, like I said, I snuck into my sister's room, and even though I know I shouldn't, I took her diary and I immediately started reading it. Everything seemed normal at first, talking about her teachers and her friends, but nothing about bullying, and some things here and there about our parents. But when I flipped to the next page, there was a picture of me with the title, "My Beautiful Sister." At first, I smiled thinking my sister really loves me, but after I really read through it, I found out my sister really loves me. She wrote about how my skin was so soft and how every time she looks at my lips, she wants to kiss me. She even wrote about how I smell so good and a lot more weird, crazy, too far things. I closed the diary and ran to my room and just freaked out. It all made sense why my sister's been acting so weird. She's been fantasizing about me. Like for part 3. Part 3 on how I read my little sister's diary and found her fantasizing about me. Okay, so boom, like I said, after I found out that my sister was fantasizing about me, I needed a game plan because I felt like that would just be too weird to tell my parents. So what I did was start being mean to my sister, and I kept sneaking into her room to read her diary every day to see if she would stop. And it worked. She stopped after about 4 months. Thank goodness. She started saying things like I can't stand my sister and how I'm spoiled and how I'm full of myself. Oh, but I didn't care. She even started writing about a new boy that she liked in class, and I was even more relieved. Thank goodness. Well, my sister hates me now, but at least she doesn't fantasize about me. Yikes. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor. Okay, so boom. My husband is a professor at a university and he loves his job. Maybe a little too much. So my husband is 50 and I'm 40, and lately he hasn't been wanting to be intimate with me at all. He's been coming home from work way later than usual, saying that he's tutoring some students. Well, I decided to cook my husband's favorite meal and surprise him for working so hard. I went to the university and opened his classroom door, and I couldn't believe my eyes. His classroom was empty, but I did see his car in the lot, so I went over to see if maybe he was just heading home. Well, when I went back downstairs, I was happy to see his car was still there. The car looked like it was shaking a little bit, but it was dark, so I just wasn't sure what was going on. I walked over to his car, and there it was. I was in complete shock. Like for part 2. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 2. Okay, so boom, like I said, I opened his classroom door and it was empty, but I did see his car downstairs, so I went back downstairs. I was happy to see his car was still downstairs, and it looked like it was shaking a little bit, but I just didn't know what was going on because it was a little bit dark. Well, I walked over to my husband's car, and there it was. My husband was in the backseat of his car with a student, and obviously not tutoring. And to my surprise, his student was a 23-year-old boy. And some back actions were taking place, child, if you know what I mean. I was so shocked, I dropped the food and I ran and went home. I didn't even give my husband a chance to react. He begged me not to leave him and said it was nothing and that he loved me. I obviously divorced him, and can you believe he's still with that same student now? Child, like for part 3. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 3. Okay, so boom, like I said, I caught my husband in the backseat of his car with a 23-year-old boy, which was his student. He begged me not to leave him and said that he loved me, but I obviously divorced him because, like, whoa. At the time, I was hurt, but I genuinely got over it because at least he's living his truth now. I, on the other hand, finally had the kids I always wanted at 42, and I'm happily married with my new husband that's so in love with me. Stay away from them professors. Storytime on how I beat up my grandma. Yes, my grandma, you heard right. Let's get into it. Okay, so boom. I'm a 16-year-old high school student who finds myself at my grandma's house almost every day. My mom's a single mother and works 2 jobs, and instead of leaving me home alone, she always drops me off at my grandma's house. And this has been our routine ever since I was 5 years old. My mom just felt more comfortable leaving me at my grandma's house. But what my mom didn't know is that I'd rather stay home alone rather than going to my grandma's house. My grandma has been beating me up ever since I was 5 years old. She didn't beat me up for any valid reasons. She would just be mad at me for the smallest things. Like one time I broke her glass chandelier while I was playing with my ball and she hit me. Another time I broke her 50-inch TV by accident and again she hit me. Y'all wouldn't believe this third reason why she beat me up. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I beat up my 76-year-old grandma. Okay, so boom, like I said, my grandma would always beat me up for the smallest things. None of her reasons were valid. She beat me up once for breaking her glass chandelier while I was playing ball. Another time I broke her 50-inch TV screen on accident and she beat me up again. She even would tell me to wash the dishes, and when I would tell her no, because I don't live here, I shouldn't be washing anything, she would once again beat me up for being quote-unquote disrespectful. All this hitting throughout the years, and I was just over it, and my mom always sided with my grandma. Well, I'm 16 now and I was over it. My 76-year-old grandma should have learned to keep her hands to herself. So this particular night she told me to study, but I didn't want to study. I wanted to watch TV, so I told her no straight up. And things escalated. Like for part 3. Part 3 on how I beat up my 76-year-old grandma. Okay, so boom, like I said, my grandma told me to go study and I told her no, I wanted to watch TV. She said she was sick of my slick mouth and made her way over to hit me. But this time, oh no, I wasn't going for it. I pushed her away from me, then I punched her on her arms and her face. She fell down and started screaming in shock that I even hit her. Once my mom came home, my grandma told my mom what happened, and my mom beat the living soul out of me. And my mom told me if I ever raised my hands to my grandma again, she was going to do more than just hit me with a belt. Truth is, my grandma never hit me unless I was rude or broke something, and that happened very often. Come to find out, I actually suffered from aggressive behavior in children and needed to get treated. Thank God I got treated and I'm better now, and me and grandma has a great relationship now. Don't beat up your grandma. Story time on how my parents sold me for a cow and goat. Okay, so boom, we jumping right into this one. So I'm an only child and my parents are farmers. My parents would always tell me how they were going to expand their herd and that I would be the one to help them. I never understood how though. I assumed that they were going to teach me how everything works and I'll eventually take over like a family business. But boy, was I wrong. On my 13th birthday, I was excited because I was going to the village to celebrate. Or so I thought. My parents actually brought me to an elderly man who I never met. The old man then examined me and smiled and gave my parents a thumbs up. Then they started debating on how much cows and goats I'm worth. And I just stood there completely confused as to what was going on. After my parents and the old man were done going back and forth about cows and goats, they came into a conclusion. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my parents sold me for a cow and goat. Okay, so boom, like I said, my parents and the old man came into a conclusion on how much I was worth. They settled at 8 cows and 6 goats. Then I was married off against my will to become this man's 8th wife. I cried and told my parents please no, but they told me that I should be grateful because I was still young and desirable. And I cost the most right now, which is making them grow a large herd. So when my parents were telling me I was going to be the one to help them, they never meant that I was taking over the farm. They were speaking about literally selling me. I was the youngest out of all the wives, so I got the most attention from my now husband. All of the other wives were like 16 and 20, so it's not like they were old or anything. And now at 14, I'm currently pregnant, expecting my first child, and I'll make sure my baby is never sold. Story time on how my mom told me she wished she never had me. Okay, so boom, jumping right in. Question, you ever had a mom who loved you, motivated you, and respected you? Yeah, well, can't say the same for me. My mom is a single mother that had me at a young age and is currently in college. But the thing is, my mom hates me. And you know why she hates me? Because I have a relationship with my dad. She's mentally abusive and sometimes physical. She tells me how she's disgusted with me and how I should worship her since she brought me into this world. And when I was younger, she tried to get me to hate my dad and even use me as a weapon against my dad. But my dad ended up putting himself on child support and doing shared custody. Well, I had a birthday party when I was turning 16 and my dad paid for everything. My mom kind of just showed up. And on my birthday, I was about to hear one of the most hurtful things a mother can say to their daughter. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my mom told me she wished she never had me. Okay, so boom, like I said, I was turning 16 and my dad threw me a birthday party where he paid for everything. And my mom kind of just showed up. She gave me really bad energy and I tried to ignore it, but later that night, I walked into the restroom looking for my mom and she was in there with her friend. And that's when I heard her say that she should have aborted me and that she wished she never had me. I cried my eyes off and my mom didn't even care when she found out. My dad ended up getting full custody and I haven't seen or spoken to my mom ever since. Now I'm at a better place and I'm happy living with my dad and my loving stepmother and sister. Sometimes someone hurt is so deep rooted it places hatred on people who's undeserving. She hated my dad for leaving but for staying with me. And that's something that she's eventually gonna have to come to terms with. But I refuse to let her bring me down. Now I'm loved, happy, and elevated. Stay blessed, y'all. Story time on how me and my dad walked into my mom sleeping with my brother. Yes, his and hers biological son. She actually took his virginity away, child. All right, let me set the scene for y'all. I was 18 at the time and my brother was 16. My parents were together, so we lived with both parents. Me and my brother went to the same school, but I was in a girls' basketball team, so I would always stay after school and he would take the bus home. And my mom would be home by the time my brother got home. 3 to 4 hours by the time my basketball practice was over, my dad would be getting off of work, so he would pick me up and we would go home together. So that was basically our routine as a family. But one day this routine changed because I sprained my ankle. I called my dad and he immediately left work to come and get me. My ankle wasn't too bad, but my coach wanted to send me home to be on the safe side to make sure I heal. Well, that night changed me and my dad's lives forever once we opened that door. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how me and my dad walked into my mom sleeping with my brother. So like I said, this day I sprained my ankle, so my dad left his job early and picked me up. And again, my ankle wasn't too bad, but my coach wanted to send me home just so I can heal and not make it worse by putting pressure on it. Regardless, once me and my dad got home, everything changed. Once we walked into the house, we immediately heard, weird sounds. We looked at each other and confirmed that, yeah, that's definitely moaning. My dad immediately thought my mom was cheating, but we just didn't know with who. The moaning was coming from my parents' room, which was just, why? At least have respect for the bed. Anywho, I limped my way over to the door with my dad. My dad opened up the door and my mom was on top of my brother, literally riding that pony. And the war began. Like for part 3. Part 3 on how me and my dad walked into my mom sleeping with my brother. So like I said, my dad opened up the door and my mom was on top of my brother riding that pony. It was disgusting. My jaws dropped. My mom jumped off covering herself and my brother sat up shaking. My dad went off. He went straight for my mom and grabbed her yelling, "What the fuck are you doing in bed with our son?" Not gonna lie, my dad was so angry he put his hands on my mom. My mom fell to the ground crying saying, "I'm so sorry." Then my dad turned around and beat my brother's behind. My brother ran to the room and I'm just still standing there in shock. I grew a hatred for my mom that day. My dad started yelling at my mom saying how she's taking advantage of their son, how he's a minor, and all she did was cry. All of a sudden, I don't know what came over me, but I called my mom a stupid, dirty whore. And the war continued, like for part 4. Part 4 on how me and my dad walked in on my mom sleeping with my brother. So like I said, my mom was on the floor crying while my dad was yelling at her for taking advantage of their son. And at the time, I hated my mom so much I called her a few less than kind words. And she had the audacity to get up and tell me not to speak to her that way. I then called her the B word, the FB word, and the W word, and it was on. She rushed at me trying to hit me, but I ended up pushing her to the floor. Then she fell to the ground saying, "How could you put your hands on your mother?" And my dad responded, "How could you put that cat on your son?" She walked into that one. Anywho, let's fast forward to the legal things. That same night, my dad called the cops on my mom and they came to our house. And they, of course, arrested my mom. Like for part 5 to find out what was her charges and what happened to my brother. Part 5 on how me and my dad walked in on my mom sleeping with my brother. So like I said, my dad called the cops and they arrested my mom. She's facing over 3 years for statutory R and it's classified as a felony. My brother still lives with my dad and I, but he has to go to therapy almost every day. And that's how we actually found out she took his V card away. Anyways, a year later, I'm still not the biggest fan of my brother, but we're okay. And I still haven't talked to my mom, and I'm happy about that. I just think she's weird and disgusting. Me and my dad are great, and he's happy with the new girl, a regular girl. Story time on how my dad had a threesome with my brother and another man. Okay, so a quick rundown. My parents divorced when I was 13 and just a year after, my dad got with another man. So at the time, I was 14, my brother was 15, my mom was 34, my dad was 36, and his boyfriend was 30. Keep up with me, guys. The age is important. My mom didn't want to see my dad or his boyfriend, so this was our routine. My mom would pick us up after school, and sometimes my dad would pick us up. But on this particular Friday, my brother wanted to stay at my dad's, but I wanted to be at my mom's. So my brother left with my dad, and I left with my mom. My mom had late shifts for the weekend, so she ended up dropping me off at my dad's. When I walked inside, I heard moaning, but not from 2 voices. It was 3 voices. I immediately knew something was up. I walked upstairs to see my dad, his boyfriend, and my brother doing the nasty. Like for part 2. Story time on how my dad had a threesome with my brother and another man. Like I said, I walked in and my dad, his boyfriend, and my brother was doing the nasty. My dad was actively sticking his inside of his boyfriend's and my brother was sitting in between the mix. Traumatized isn't the word. They all jumped up, but I ran outside and immediately called my mom. My mom came back so angry, she started throwing a whole bunch of books at my dad, but I just held her back and we all left. My dad ended up getting married to this guy and they adopted a child. My mom got full custody of me and my brother, and my dad isn't allowed to see us anymore. My brother is going to therapy and said that it was forced and that he didn't want to. Do I miss my dad? No. Good riddance. Story time on how I caught my mom cheating on my dad with a woman. Okay, so a quick rundown. At this point, my parents been married for 20 years. They would have little arguments here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary of a regular couple. My dad was a doctor and my mom was a nurse, so my dad worked a lot. But usually when I would come home from school, my mom would be home. Well, this particular day, it was early release, and we all know how that goes. Happy as hell to go home early. Little did I know I was about to walk into some mess, honey. Obviously, my mom wasn't expecting me to be home this early. Well, I opened up that door and right there on the living room couch, y'all, the position she was in. Oh my gosh. It's the audacity for me. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I caught my mom cheating on my dad with a woman. So like I said, I came home from school early because it was early release day and my mom wasn't expecting me. I opened up that door and I was literally not expecting anything. But there my mama was. Both legs up, wide open with a woman eating that cat. My mouth dropped to the floor and I screamed, Oh my gosh. My mom jumped off that couch so fast and pushed that woman so hard she fell to the floor. She tried to cover herself with the clothes next to her and said, "Baby, please, let me talk to you." And the classic, say it with me, "It's not what it looks like." Child, I ran to my room and I closed that damn door. Life of part 3. Last part on how my mom cheated on my dad with a woman. So they got into an argument after I snitched, and basically my mom was reassuring him how she just wants to be with him and that was just a mistake. The relationship was rocky and on bad terms for about a year, but eventually my parents actually got through it. To be honest, it only worked out because it was a woman. If it was a man, I'm pretty sure my dad would have left. We eventually got over it as a family and I got a little brother. But one thing about it, I will always be traumatized.
The strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. Today, we have North Carolina. This story is called the Below Murders, and it took place in Windsor, North Carolina. Below was the name of the local grocery store, and on a warm June night in 1993, something very awful happened. A murderer hid in the store and waited until closing time, and once the crew started doing their nightly duties and cleaning and closing, he jumped out and held them at gunpoint. All of the employees were bound, gagged, and then brought to the meat cutting room. In there, he stacked their bodies and started firing the gun until he was out of bullets. He grabbed a knife and stabbed each and every victim. One of the injured employees actually managed to get to the phone and call the police before they died. When the police arrived, they were not prepared for what they were going to see, such as people lying in their own piles of blood and a man with a knife in his back. The police actually found this one man that they thought was dead because he was drenched in blood, but he was actually unharmed and still alive. The strangest part is nobody even knows who would have done this or what motive they had. The Below shut down shortly after, and to this day, the police are still trying to find out who did this.
So I was talking to this one guy. Let's call him Jay, just to make it a little bit easier. So I had met this guy at a party and we were just friends and there was no sexual tension between us at all. We had hung out. I probably asked him to hang out about 3 to 5 times. There was this one time after we'd grabbed some food and he had texted me asking me, and I quote, "I would love to take you to dinner." I didn't know the context of this dinner though, but I still said yes. Before I continue, I should state that I've had exes and first dates before, and I have always insisted to pay half of the bill or even the whole bill. Unless it was my boyfriend who insisted that he wanted to pay, then I would say yeah, because I know for a full fact that next time I would get his. But anyways, back to the story. So I was dating this one guy. He wanted to take me to dinner, so we went along to this Italian place only to find out that it was shut. So instead, we decided to go down to the city centre and find a restaurant down there. He was super fussy, but we finally found a place. But then I'm running out of time. Good. Part 2 of the dinner date that I went on. So after ages of trying to find a restaurant because he was so fussy, but it was like a 15 wait just to get sat down. Of course we waited though, and by the time we got sat down I wasn't even that hungry, so I ended up spending about $5 on drinks. On the other hand, he decided to get a burger, sweet potato fries and also some bread rolls. It took 40 minutes just to arrive, and when it did arrive he insisted that I had one of his bread rolls. He said that he ordered some for me, which I actually thought was really sweet. So he ate the rest of it, I had a bread roll, and then the check came. I decided to give him $15, kind of expecting for him to give me a little bit back, which he did. He gave me $10 back and then immediately took it back to himself. So I ended up spending about $15 on like half of the bill. I didn't mention anything on the topic, but I thought it was really rude, considering my bill would only came to $5 and it was almost 3 times the amount. I really did not know how to take it, but I still think it was so rude. I need to know your guys' opinions. This is a paranormal story time sent in from a follower called Caden. If anything paranormal scares you, then I would scroll down now. So Caden would always hear thud noises, specifically underneath the staircase when she was alone. She lived by herself, but the thud noises didn't really faze her, considering that she lived in a busy area. Obviously, it used to freak her out, but she used to just sort of ignore it, until one day it changed into footsteps. All of these horrifying noises all happened up until Christmas. Until on the Tuesday, she started getting really weird dreams and no one would believe her or what had happened. Dream number 1. So she was laying in bed and seemed to be having a nightmare until she felt a figure next to her. She couldn't figure out any faces considering it was really dark, but for anything it was like a black cloud. These flashing images kept running through her head until she went to the toilet. A womanly figure was stepping out of the wall. This black cloud would just stand there and stare at her. It felt like something was directly running through her veins. These pictures would not stop running through her head. This womanly ghost was just standing there. I'm running out of... This is part 2 of the paranormal story time. So like I was saying, no one would believe me that this woman was literally following me around. She woke up in my bed and then I saw her in the bathroom. I thought my nightmares couldn't get possibly any worse than this, and then I had my dream number 2. It was almost as if I was looking for a security camera in my bedroom. And I saw the lady in a position on the floor that was so unhumanly and impossible for a human to perfect. She gave me this deafening smile and started running towards me. She was screaming at me, but I couldn't possibly figure out the words because I was so petrified. This woman legit looked like death. The worst part yet was that she was standing right in front of me and I had to jump out my dream. I then woke up, but I honestly don't want to go back to sleep because I'm so scared that this woman's going to kill me. My biggest fear is now unlocked and I honestly don't want to go back to bed. I think I'm going to be...
My mom got pregnant many years ago after she married my dad, and they were both overjoyed to have a daughter. After my birth, they were waiting anxiously for me when the nurse walked in, looking nervous. I'm not sure if you want to see her. Oh my God. Is she ugly? I'm going to have a heart attack if she's ugly. I think she's a dwarf. Mom leapt forward and took me from the nurse, and Dad stared at me in horror. I was really tiny and ugly, like a frog. I'll have you fired, you moron. I don't care what my daughter looks like. She's mine, and she's beautiful. So what if she's a bit small? But as years went by and my progress was monitored by doctors, I was diagnosed with slower growth than most people, which meant I'd always look younger than I actually am. Mom didn't care, as long as I was healthy. But Dad couldn't handle it. How is it even possible? Everyone in my family is practically a basketball player. Be honest with me, woman. Is she even mine? Mom started screaming and throwing things at him, and he went running out of the door. And that's the last I ever saw of him. Once, when I was 6, Mom took me to a birthday party at her boss's house. I was really excited to meet other kids, but the minute they saw me, they all started staring and then laughing. OMG, just look at it. It's so tiny. With that, the birthday girl Brenda took my hairband off. Hey, give it back, you jerk. Catch it if you can, shorty. Come on, jump a little higher. Suddenly, I lost it. I climbed onto a chair and pounced on her, and we went crashing into the pile of birthday presents, which landed straight in the pool. As Brenda screamed, Mom's boss came running and went ballistic. Who is this out-of-control toddler? Where did she come from? That's my daughter, Adley. But you said your daughter was 6 years old. I don't know who this child is. I'm calling the police. Her boss just picked me up and started carrying me away. Oh my God, she's mine. But her crazy boss wouldn't let us go till the cops arrived. Of course, Mom was able to prove I was her kid, but she was so furious. She flung a piece of cake at her boss's face. I'm not working for you, psycho. I quit. Even though Mom was struggling to find a new job, she soon enrolled me in the best school around. On the first day, I was about to go inside the building when a giant limo almost bumped into me. Hey, are you blind? You could have hurt me. A girl got down from the car, and it was that awful Brenda.
Storytime. A girl named Akira Kendrick sent me this story, and the background of it is that her dad was very abusive to her mother, and her mother got custody of Akira, and her dad was not happy about that. Anyway, so Akira was with her aunt and her cousins at her grandmother's house, all on her mother's side, and her dad stops by to say hello. And Akira's outside playing with her cousin, and her dad comes up to her and grabs her arm and says, "Do you want to go to Walmart with me?" And at the time, she's only 7, so all she hears is toy aisle, so she says, "Yes, let's go." So they get in the car, they head to Walmart, she gets some really nice pom-poms, and then he says, "Okay, let's go back to your grandmother's house." So he starts driving and he gets on the highway, and Akira knows that her grandmother's house is right around the corner from Walmart, so he does not need to get on the highway. So she says, "Dad, where are we going?" And he gets really mad and says, "Shut up, sit down, it does not matter." So Akira's in the back seat, she's really scared, and she just shuts her mouth. So after being in the car for a while, they eventually arrived at this really old, abandoned, beat up house. And when they walk in, Akira sees about 25 people and she does not know any of them. Her dad brings her to a room, puts her in a little closet, throws her some toys and her pom-poms and says, "Play." Part 2 of Akira's dad literally kidnapping her. So when they get to the house, Akira is really scared. She doesn't know any of these 25 people. Her dad brings her to a room, throws her in a closet, puts some toys in there and says play. So after about an hour of being in a little closet with some toys, she finally decides to get up and go look for her dad. So she opens the door and starts looking around, and there's no one in the house. There's not even a single trace of somebody ever being there. So of course she starts freaking out and crying. She doesn't know where she is. She's so far away from her grandmother's house, and she doesn't have a phone. And so eventually, after 3 hours, she hears somebody. She looks up and her dad is standing there, and he says, "Come on, let's go, the cops are outside." So basically, Akira's aunt called the cops and they had a search warrant for him. They ended up finding her dad and they said to him, "If you don't take us to her, you will go to jail." And obviously, from what I just said, he finally took them to her at this random old abandoned house and they found her. And they ended up putting him in jail anyways, because why not? 2 years in jail and 1 year on probation. Don't steal children, people.
You will never believe what just happened to me. So I'm visiting home right now for the holidays, and I decided that today I want to go thrifting. You know, hit all my favorite spots. So I get into this thrift shop, I'm looking around, and I spot this beautiful Levi's jean jacket. It was in the men's section, but who cares? I make a beeline for the jacket. I go to grab the jacket, and some other guy's hands grab the jacket too. So we're like touching hands. I look up, and it's this beautiful, gorgeous man, okay? He looks about my age. Just a good-looking guy, okay? So we kind of just stared at each other for a second. Then all of a sudden, we started arguing about who saw the jacket first. And eventually, I gave up because I wanted to be nice, and I let him get the jacket. I watch him check out the jacket and leave. But then as I'm leaving, I see a bag hanging on the side of my car. It has the jacket in it. He left me this note with his number on it. I think I just had my Disney.
About the child that traumatized you in your childhood. Come on, I feel like we all have one. For me, that bitch's name was Summer. My mom was friends with Summer's mom, and I guess they thought that me and Summer would get along great because we were like within the same age range, and I was really excited to have a friend who was older than me, prettier than me, and like, I'm an introvert, so pre-made friendship, I was like, delicious. I was intent on having this friendship. What I didn't know was that Summer was psycho. This girl was like a pathological liar and a future knee brace wearer on the outside of her pants in the making to paint you that picture. Anyways, so I get to her house and she's like, do you want to watch a movie? And I'm like, yeah, sure, like Barbie. She's like, no. Have you seen werewolf movies? I'm like, Summer, I'm 4. I'm going to inform you that I just learned how to zip up my coat yesterday. So no, I have not seen werewolf movies. And she's like, we're going to watch one. It's great. He rips the guy's face off and they die. I'm like, you're done. You're done. You are done. And you're 5. A couple days later, my mom sets another play date with me and Summer, and I'm like, this was a great experience. Let's do it again. So I go to Summer's house, and she takes me up to her room, and I'm like, wow, you have such a beautiful room. And she's like, don't touch anything. And I'm like, whoa, okay. You do not. And she looked at me and said, stay there. Don't touch anything. Stay there. Don't touch anything. Bitch literally leaves like this, flicks off the lights, closes the door behind her. I hear the door lock behind her. Freak show paranormal activity has locked me in her room. After a while, my mom's like, where is my infant daughter? And she goes to go check on me, and she sees Summer just sitting there, sitting on the stairs, guarding the door. And my mom's like, hey, Summer, where's my child? And Summer's like, John, I ain't seen a thing. I don't know where she is. And my mom's like, well, I think you do. And Summer's like, no, I don't know where she is. So my mom's like, well, I'm just gonna go check on her. And she goes to walk past Summer, and Summer's like blocking her. She's like, no, don't go up there. She's not here. Your daughter's not here. And I'm like, what movie have I stumbled into? So I'm having a full meltdown, right? And my mom can hear that, and she's like, well, I'm just gonna follow the sound of mental illness because I can hear her behind that door. And she unlocks it, and I'm having a mental breakdown. His mom's punishment for locking me in her room and holding me hostage was to sit on the stairs and think about what she did. Girl, she was already doing that when she was guard dogging me in her room.
This is why you should be careful who you believe. Once there was a girl named Danny who lived with her parents, but one day she came home and found something terrifying. She went to the kitchen to get some water, but dropped the glass and screamed in terror. On the floor, she saw the body of her mother. Then her father burst into the room. He said, Danny, listen carefully. Your mom was trying to run away and abandon us. We got in a fight. She fell. It was an accident. I'm so sorry. Danny was in shock, but nothing could have prepared her for what her father said next. We had to get rid of the evidence ourselves. If the neighbors ask questions, just say she ran away with another man. Danny ran upstairs to her room in tears. That's when she found something strange. On her bed was a suitcase with all her clothes folded inside. On top of the suitcase was a note. It said, Danny, I packed your things. We need to leave. Your father has gone insane.
I have a movie idea. Hear me out. A woman in her mid-20s decides to sell her eggs. I mean her eggs. The eggs that turn into babies. She finds out that a couple purchases her eggs. But there are rules when it comes to this stuff. She's not supposed to know who they are. She's not supposed to have any sort of contact with the child. Understandable. So this couple used this woman's egg. They got pregnant and had a beautiful baby girl. But 3 years later, the mother gets into a tragic accident. About 6 months after the accident, the man meets a new woman. She's kind, mysterious, and she treats his daughter as if she was her own. What this man doesn't know is that woman
is the mother of his child. Does the woman know that that's her kid? Will the father ever find out? Did the woman plan this all along? And was his wife's accident really an accident? I need a job.
If you've ever thought about getting your ears pierced, don't do what she did. This is the urban legend about a girl in Japan who tried to do it, then ended up with horrifying consequences. So this young girl really wanted to get her ears pierced. After some pleading with her parents, they finally agreed and gave her some money to go do it. But instead, the girl kept the money and decided to pierce them herself and let her friend help her. They heated up a large needle and went for it one day. It was painful, but in the end, she was happy she could finally wear earrings. However, this wouldn't last long. One day in school, she felt an intense pain in her left ear. Her earlobe was itchy, and by the end of the day, she had a headache. She went into the bathroom and saw her ear was very inflamed. Then she looked closer and saw a piece of white string sticking out of her new piercing. She picked and pulled at it, which only made the string longer. Now it was hanging out of her earlobe. The string seemed to be endless. The more she pulled, the longer it got. Finally fed up, she took a pair of scissors and cut the string. Suddenly, everything went black. There was a burning pain in her ears and her eyes. She began to scream. In the hospital, it was revealed that it wasn't a piece of string at all. She had pulled out a piece of her optic nerve and cut it. She would be blind for the rest of her life. This man thought he got away with something terrible he did as a kid, but he was wrong. Wunzer was a rich businessman. Let's just call him Derek. Derek was walking home from work when a boy ran up to him and started pulling on his suit. He said, "Mister, give me 1 penny." Derek shouted, "Leave me alone," and walked away. The boy was left outside freezing in the cold. The next day, the same boy was standing on the street and said, "Mister, give me 1 penny." Derek was annoyed. He threw a penny at him and said, "Here, there you go, now leave me alone." But he could have never known who this boy actually was. This time, when he got home, he started feeling uneasy. Something about these interactions felt a bit weird to him. He went to bed, tried to fall asleep, but as soon as he closed his eyes, he heard a voice right up against his ear say, "Mister, give me 1 penny." Derek jumped out of bed. His wife told him to calm down, so he tried to. There was no one else in the room, but something was wrong. Derek began to remember what he did. When he was a young boy, him and his friends had done something horrible. Terrified, he went up to the attic and found his old yearbook. Then, flipping through the pages, he saw a photo. Derek thought, how was this possible? He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Follow for part 2. This is why you should never knock on a stranger's door. Once there was a man trying to check into a hotel. The woman at the front desk gave him his key and told him none of the guests are allowed to go into the room across the hall. He agreed, but as he continued to stay in the hotel, he grew more and more curious about the room he wasn't supposed to go in. At one point, he even walked down the hall to that room and tried the door. It was locked. Then he bent down and looked through the keyhole. He saw that it was just the same as his hotel room. But in the corner of the room, there was a woman whose skin was extremely pale, almost a sickly white. Her back was to the wall, so the man didn't see what she looked like. He almost knocked on the door, but then just decided to leave her alone. The next day, he walked past the door again and decided to look into the keyhole. This time, there was no hotel room and no woman. It was all just red. He thought that this seemed really strange, so he went to the front desk and asked about the room. After insisting on an answer, the woman at the front desk told him, "A long time ago, a man killed his wife in that room, and her ghost is still there. But these ghosts are not what you might imagine. They're completely white all over, except for their eyes, which are red."
Don't open your eyes. On the last day of every month, close the blinds or curtains before you sleep. If in the middle of the night you hear a tapping noise at your window, don't open your eyes. If you're one of the unlucky ones, you'll hear the pebble sound at your window. It's not a friend, just keep your eyes shut. The sound will get louder, the tapping will get faster and faster. Don't let your curiosity get the better of you. Don't move. It'll lose its patience, it'll start thumping the window. Your window will shake and shudder and the noises will only get louder. It will furiously pound the window and shake the panes. Don't worry, the window won't break, but for goodness sake, don't open your eyes. No matter how scared you are, no matter how badly you want to scream, pretend you don't hear, pretend you're still asleep. After a while, the noises will stop. Don't fall for it, keep your eyes shut. Try to sleep if you can. Don't get up, don't open your eyes until the sun comes up. Those who do open their eyes, well, no one really knows what happened.
There is no way you can predict the ending to this one. In 1900, a man arrived on a little island off the coast of Scotland to relieve one of the 3 lighthouse workers that was there. As he neared the lighthouse, he saw the iron railings had been folded and ripped out of the concrete, and a big boulder that sat out front had moved. When he reached the lighthouse, the door was open, and inside there were half-eaten bowls of food sitting on the table, chairs flipped over, no sign of the 3 men, but there was one clue: their logbook. In the last few entries of the logbook, one of the men describes the winds outside as being more severe than anything he's seen in 20 years. He also says they've been crying and praying for the storm to stop. But why would 3 highly experienced lighthouse workers that have probably ridden out dozens of bad storms before, and they were in a brand new lighthouse that was considered safe, be crying and praying for this particular storm to end? The very last thing they wrote before they disappeared without a trace was, "Storm ended, sea is calm, God is over all." Except here's the problem. There was never any storm anywhere near their island that
This is why you should never go for someone's looks. Once there was a man who married a woman with long black hair and brown eyes. He thought she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, but soon things went terribly wrong. Over the years, her appearance changed, but he couldn't handle it. He didn't like that she gained weight or that her face now had wrinkles on it. For that reason, he quickly divorced her and found a different girl. This would be a horrifying mistake. The new girl was much younger and had long blonde hair. Within weeks, he married her, but as soon as they moved in, he noticed that she completely changed. She wasn't sweet and polite anymore. She became rude and used him for money. One night, he couldn't take it anymore. He got in his car, left the city, and drove back to his ex-wife's house. And what he saw there shocked him. The house was abandoned. He knocked on the door, but no one answered, so he went in. And there, sitting in their old bedroom, was his ex-wife with her long black hair covering her face. He hugged her and cried, explaining how he regretted leaving her. And that's when she said, "I'm glad you're back, if only for a moment." The man said, "What do you mean? I'm back for good. We can spend our lives together." Then he brushed her hair out of her face and screamed. All that's left was a skull. That's when the man looked down and realized he'd been holding nothing but a pile of bones. When you go to sleep tonight, don't do what she did. Once there was a young woman named Alicia who moved into a very old house with her parents, but she could have never expected the horrifying things that this would lead to. After living in this house for a few weeks, things started becoming strange. Alicia noticed she was becoming weaker and feeling sick. Pretty soon she couldn't leave her bed and was asleep for most of the day. The doctors came to examine her and everyone wanted to find out what this mysterious sickness was, but no one had any answers. Until one day Alicia passed away while sleeping. Then after her funeral, her mother came home and with a broken heart began cleaning her room. That's when she noticed something strange about Alicia's pillow. There were 2 small red stains. She picked it up and realized the pillow was unusually heavy, so she called her husband to go look at it with her. Then Alicia's mother felt something inside the pillow move. Her father opened the pillow and took all the feathers out. There they saw something crawl out. It was a monstrous black spider. Night after night, as Alicia lay in bed, this huge spider had been slowly drinking all her blood through her pillow. Never play this game with your friends. Once there was a group of girls who heard about the game Baby Blue. They didn't believe in it but thought they could scare their friend Laura. So they sent Laura into a bathroom by herself. She turned off the lights, closed the door, and put her arms out as if to hold a baby. Then started chanting Baby Blue 13 times. What happened next cannot be explained. Laura felt a heavy weight in her arms. Then she felt the weight in her arms scratching her. She was terrified and didn't know what to do. She wanted to drop it, but she was afraid of what might happen if she did, so she froze, and the weight grew heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she saw a woman in the bathroom mirror with a twisted look on her face. She screamed in terror. When her friends heard her scream, they tried to open the door, but it was locked. When they finally opened the door, they found Laura on the floor. Her eyes had been scratched out. They tried to move her body, but they couldn't, because something large and invisible was pinning her to the ground.